Next on our journey through Quentin Tries the Genres is the Western, well, full-blown Western, with 2015's The Hateful Eight, in which a blizzard strands a disparate group of travellers at a way station in the mountains of Wyoming. A number of the director's previous collaborators return here, including Bruce Dern, Tim Roth, Michael Madsen, Walton Goggins, Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell. This last plays bounty hunter John the Hangman Ruth, who we first meet handcuffed to Jennifer Jason Leigh's Daisy Domergue, a wanted murderer he is transporting to Red Rock for trial and execution, the film suggesting no doubt whatsoever over her guilt. On the road, he, separately, encounters two distressed travellers, fellow bounty hunter Major Marquis Warren, Sam Jackson, and a former Confederate soldier and soon-to-be new Sheriff of Red Rock, Chris Mannix, Goggins. Ruth reluctantly grants him room in his privately booked stagecoach, fearing either an attempt to steal his bounty or an attempt to free her. Ruth's perturbation increases on the group's arrival at Minnie's Haberdashery, the roadside inn where the familiar owners are nowhere to be found. In their stead is Senor Bob, Damien Bichir, a Mexican who claims to be an employee, as well as a few guests. Michael Madsen's Joe Gage, a cowboy, Oswaldo Mowbray, Tim Roth, somehow managing to sport a spectacularly unconvincing English accent, and the local executioner, and a Confederate general, played by Bruce Dern. Certain that at least one of these people is not who they claim to be, Ruth disarms them all, with the exception of Major Warren, and the group settle in for an uncomfortable and tense few days together until the blizzard passes and the road to Red Rock is passable again. Not that Mr. Tarantino's previous work suggests anything at all, but you may reasonably surmise that not everyone who walked into Minnie's Haberdashery will be leaving in the same manner. It'd be nice to be able to talk about Quentin Tarantino's take in the Western, perhaps comparing it with genre-redefining works like those of Sergio Leone, of whom Tarantino is a noted fan, or even Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. But whether or not old Quentin is capable of making a Once Upon a Time in the West, he clearly has no interest in doing so, as The Hateful Eight is a Quentin Tarantino film. It's just that this Quentin Tarantino film happens to be one set in 1870s Wyoming. In that regard, there's not much else to say. For the most part, I enjoy Quentin Tarantino films a lot, and I enjoyed this a lot. The dialogue is fun, if at times distasteful, and the performances are all very enjoyable. Kurt Russell in particular feeling much more comfortable here, bringing back aspects of both Tombstone's Wyatt Earp and Escape from New York's Snake Plissken than he did as a murderer in Death Proof. And while its near 3-hour running time is pushing it a bit, it's only the flashback scene that shows the setup that feels extraneous. It's in the visuals though that The Hateful Eight really stands out. Shot by Robert Richardson using Ultra Panavision 70 lenses last used on the 1966 film Khartoum and thought to no longer exist, which were then retrofitted to modern Panavision cameras, and the film filmed on 65mm Kodak Vision 35219 stock, all you film fans out there, allowing the director's dream of shooting a 70mm film to be realised, and resulting in his best looking film. These lenses were then used in an unexpected location. Indoors. The super wide 2.76:1 aspect ratio that the lenses allowed provides a genuinely interesting look to the film, and also allows multiple characters to be seen at once in multiple scenes, capturing reactions and movements without having to change the coverage. And it just works so well as the tensions rise. The music isn't left out either, with The Hateful Eight being the first Tarantino film to feature an original score, composed by the legendary Ennio Morricone, plus the addition of 3 of the tracks from Morricone's unused score from The Thing. I continue to enjoy this film. I am, though, just left with that constant sense of disappointment that there isn't more there. I want a steak, Quentin. Stop giving me dessert.
I liked this more second time round because this time round I was prepared for its deeply unsatisfying rope-a-dope of the whole presenting a whodunit scenario and then immediately answering that with a character who you haven't seen for the last 2 hours. By that point, I think it's about 2 hours. And I found that incredibly annoying first time round because it is the equivalent of The Butler Did It, which as any right will know, you don't do. And
It's a bit Deus Ex Machina, isn't it?
yes, but this time round I was a bit more prepared for that, and I could enjoy it a bit more and just enjoy it as a Tarantino film, in which case, as you say, it is a Tarantino film. It does the Tarantino things, of which we have enumerated in reviews, passing to the point that I don't think we need to say too much about it, otherwise I'd be repeating myself. Yes, it is a lot of fun. Samuel L. Jackson is incredible in it and makes the whole thing worthwhile. All the characters are, really great, fun characters to kind of spend a few hours with. I would argue this is too long. I could have done with half an hour being chopped out of this. It pushes it a little bit for me, but not too much. I've certainly seen much worse offenders in my time. I think this could have been tightened up a bit and been bit better for it, but it is still a very good film, and I enjoyed it a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bit I mentioned, Scott, that the setup must be in the region of 20 minutes or something, I think.
Yeah.
And it's unnecessary because you can surmise most of it, and anything you can't, you could have had one line of dialogue like,
yes.
yeah, my brother was here waiting, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the... It's not so much the running time, it's just that it was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
I actively disliked this film to a great degree for many of the reasons that you have mentioned. If anyone can offer me an explanation as to why this film needed to be almost 3 hours long, I would gladly hear it and then dismiss it roundly. You don't need the first 2 chapters. We learn enough about the characters, and it can be covered in dialogue through the rest of the film in the remaining setting of the cabin. I think that would be a much more interesting film. I'm surprised that you engaged with the characters so much, Scott. I really didn't engage with. I didn't like any of these characters. I liked some of the performances, but I didn't particularly enjoy the time that I spent with them. I did think, because the only substantial thing that I've seen Walton Goggins in before was Sons of Anarchy.
Right.
And so my experience with him was incredibly limited, and I think he actually pulled off a pretty good balancing act here of making a potentially deeply unlikable character at least engaging and interesting.
Yeah.
I don't really care for anyone else. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, I was going to refer to Deus Ex Machina myself, Drew, in deductive reasoning terms, because much like you, Scott, I have great issues with how this plays out in the resolution of this film. Not least of all, hey, Bob, do you know how I know you're talking because of this thing you couldn't possibly have known about, and nor could the viewers? I'm going to pull a sign that says I hate Mexicans out of my ass, because otherwise I can't explain this away. And I think that's just really that's really bad writing. I was surprised, actually, because I was quite looking forward to watching this, and it came as quite a disappointment, so much so that I nearly took another one of those sabbaticals. Only third time lucky I didn't, and I'm really glad I didn't. We'll talk about why. We'll talk about why in a minute. But yeah, I really couldn't engage with this at all. Maybe I'll come back to it at some point in future and give it a second viewing. But at 2 hours 45 or whatever, what you say, Scott, it could do with half an hour chopping out. I honestly think it could do with losing an hour. There's just no justification for the length of this film whatsoever. And I thought it was a weird step backward, but I appreciate other people's mileage will of course vary. It just rubbed me up the wrong way in so many different aspects. But
I can see why it would, Craig, and certainly in other circumstances it would have rubbed me the wrong way. But I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's hard to say that I like any of the characters, and in a film called The Hateful Eight, I'm going to guess that you're probably not supposed to. But I don't know. I think it's just because this is good. Kurt Russell has turned up here, and Sam Jackson is Sam Jackson. So I kind of like them because of the actors more than the characters, I think.
yeah,
And what's weird about this actually is this didn't feel to me so much like Quentin Tarantino does a Western, in the end, this time, I was like, this is Quentin Tarantino's take on Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
Although her structure's a bit better because she's less likely to have a man hiding in the basement.
Yes. If this had come out after Knives Out, everybody would be talking about how it was Tarantino's Knives Out. But I don't, again, touching on the treatment of female characters again, was it really necessary to show the sort of massacre?
Yes, and that whole section is unnecessary too. It's like you just assume they've killed them, and that's.
I feel like it's almost a play to try and justify the brutality thereafter, but then don't make that so brutal. It's like as if to say, well, look, the bloodbath at the end's justified because look at the horrible acts these people committed. It's like, yeah, I just couldn't get behind that at all. It just didn't sit right with me. I'm not trying to be Captain Social Justice Warrior or anything. There's contexts in which that would be entirely justified. I just don't think this movie sold it to me. I just found it problematic for a whole number of reasons, and just nothing quite clicked together. And it's a shame because I was really looking forward to it. I'll be honest, I wasn't that blown away by the cinematography. I'm not convinced that needed to be a 70mm film either. But again, I know enough people would disagree with me on that I'm entirely open to being wrong about it. But I don't know. I just felt like it was a string of odd choices that were just like one step removed from the right thing, and it didn't quite gel for me. But again, listen, enough people really engage with this. I've heard people say this is their favourite Tarantino film. More power to them. But just, for whatever reason, just not for me.
It's not my favourite, isn't in contention for it, but I enjoy this a great deal. Although you mentioned the chapters, Craig, it's like that's one of those. I was like, why in chapter 4 is there suddenly a narrator?
Yes.
A few of these Tarantino films.
He does that a couple of times.
Narrator.
Yeah, it's like, do you not have confidence enough in your ability to tell this stuff visually? Why do we suddenly need somebody to drop in a voiceover?
Yeah, I dislike unnecessary narration films generally, but
it's weird because for someone who's so confident, it comes across as a lack of confidence, and I'm sure that's not why. I'm sure he feels it was justified for other reasons, but I don't understand why that can't be covered in. Look, the rest of the dialogue does its job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a few of these films, and I had made this note about a film. This is the one I really want to mention because it appears out of nowhere.
Yep.
It's like all the films going, chapter 4, narration about what Daisy Domergue saw.
Yeah.
There's no narration after that. Why?
Yeah.
It's like you...
it's literally to mention the
something
fact...
shiny in that scene.
Yeah, and it's literally to mention the fact, 15 minutes ago, it's like that's a really weird... There are other plot points in this film that if you really wanted to put a voiceover in would have made more sense to do it. It's not... Yeah, I don't see why it was necessary for that particular scene. I think we could have grasped that we were seeing something that had happened 15 minutes earlier through other means.
Yeah, couldn't you just have had, while the speech is going on and Senor Ball's playing the piano, all you need is one cutaway. See Jennifer Jason Leigh looking to the side, one cutaway, an unknown hand pouring the poison in. That's it. And you cut out 10 minutes of film there too. It's like, it's a strange choice. It's one of the things that bothers me most about it because it stands out so much because it doesn't fit with the rest of the film. It's so unnecessary and it's so artless.
Yeah. And it's a weird thing he returns to time and again. But yeah, it does feel, you're right, it does feel particularly egregious here because it's the one instance. I think it stands out even more.
And it happens in their next film as well, where Kurt Russell's suddenly narrating bits of the film when he wasn't before.
Yep.
But it's so egregious in this. It's like one thing that really stands out to me. That like, why is this in here? But I like the rest of it, so I'm more forgiving than I suspect you are in this case.
There are moments I enjoyed. For me, it just didn't hang together. But there you go.